Go.
Welcome to this episode of So What's the Catch? This is a special weekend breaking news emergency version of it. Now, we're here to talk about the big news about Deshaun Watson and his trade to the Cleveland Browns, which is agreed to but not official or finalized yet. But before we get into the whole football aspect of things, there are a few things we need to address first. The reason why Deshaun Watson did not play at all last year is because of multiple sexual assault allegations. The Texans essentially kept him from playing football. He did not play, and he had a lot of legal issues that are still ongoing. While he did not receive any criminal charges in Texas, there are still 22 civil lawsuits that could not go in his way. So if you consider that, there's a reason why the Texans were trying to move him. There's a reason why certain aspects of the trade are very controversial. There's a reason why not that many teams were necessarily interested in his services because of the backlash that would come from acquiring someone like Deshaun Watson. There's a lot of stuff that we do know and a lot of stuff we don't know. The fact of the matter is there's 23 people that know that happened, and the three of us are not in that group of people. Deshaun Watson is a very polarizing figure. He's a very controversial figure. And we don't know how all of this is going to unfold. We don't know how or when he will play for the Cleveland Browns this season. But before we had to discuss anything football related, we really needed to get that out in just front before we discuss the football aspects of this, because it wouldn't be right not to do so. There's a lot of things that Watson is accused of doing, and it sounds like he most likely did. And they're inexcusable, they're disgusting, they're inappropriate. And that's just, it's not acceptable behavior from any sort of human. But when you look at why he is now available to the Browns, there's a reason why. So while some people are happy and completely ecstatic, there's a lot more to this whole situation than I think people are really willing to take into account. And with that, the Browns did end up acquiring Deshaun Watson yesterday after he agreed to come to Cleveland, after they continued to, I guess, put a full court press on him in the trade negotiations. This came after Watson told them no. Right. And it was definitely something I didn't see was going to happen. I mean, everybody was shocked. I know you two were as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I want to thank you for setting the table for us, James, because it is a very serious situation. And we have to be able to separate Deshaun Watson, the human, from Deshaun Watson, the athlete. Mm-hmm. And being that we're a sports show, we aren't members of the justice system. We're not involved in the process. Mm-hmm. The best that we can do is just be responsible and report the truth to you. And the truth is that there are some very serious things that he's accused of doing. And if, even one of them is true, then by all means, he's probably not a very good human being. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, we are just sports guys. We're going to talk about his impact on the field. But we do want our viewers to know that we absolutely 100% support the judicial process that is going on with Deshaun Watson. And I know personally, I'll accept any outcome in terms of a suspension or whatever it ends up being. I'm going to accept it and I'm going to be okay with it. But what I can do is I can break down a little bit about what he does do on the field, So now that we've done that and set the table, why don't we discuss his impact on the field? Josh, unless you had anything you wanted to add before we get into that.
Yeah, so just one quick thing. I think the three of us kind of share this sentiment in that I think we're going to view Deshaun Watson in the same way we view Kareem Hunt. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but we know what Kareem Hunt did and all the legal issues he got into. I'm not going to get into all the details about that, but maybe we don't necessarily root for him individually, but we root for the success of the Browns.
Right.
So, am I on the right track? That's
You're
how we're
on the right track. I mean, that's probably going to be the best way to go about it. If you're not one of the many people who vocally renounced their fandom on Twitter of the Browns yesterday and continue to do so as each minute passes. But looking at the situations between Kareem Hunt and Deshaun Watson, while similar, they're still different. I mean, there is
I understand
what Kareem Hunt did. He did get in a fight in Kelly's Island, I believe.
Yeah.
He did get pulled over by the police like 5 minutes from my house with weed in his car. So like it's different. It's similar but different.
Yeah.
Watson, all we have really is, I guess, we have accusations. We have one person who did not get involved in the lawsuit that went on the record that has some corroborating evidence in regards to the person who referred Watson to her. But it's so that doesn't necessarily point in a good direction for him. Right. But as far as on the field goes, I mean, you look at it and you root for the success of the team. You don't necessarily root for the player. And I mean, that's probably the best way to go about it.
So I think we're all in agreement on that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And here's the thing is if we're going to hold every single member of a 53-man roster to a certain moral standard, you guys are going to find out. You're going to find out quickly if you're somebody that hasn't looked into the character of a lot of these players that most of them are not heroes. Most of them are not people that I would want my nephew necessarily looking up to. There are certainly several who do amazing things for the community and donate millions of dollars and are absolutely tremendous human beings, but that's not the case for everybody. But just like in the sports world, the real world is quite similar, you know. Let's face it, like a lot of us work for employers that we don't know personally. We don't know what they do on their weekends, on their downtime. So yeah, it's at some point we have to continue to do our jobs, and what our job is to analyze the Browns, and you know, we are fans of the team. So yeah, like we're going to root for the team to have success. We want that for the city. We want that, you know, for the people who love Cleveland. But yeah, you know, we have to separate the two. So
yeah.
I mean, you look at some of the guys on the team and currently are cashing paychecks weekly by the Browns. A lot of people were up in arms about, you know, the Browns sacrificing their morals. I don't know they had any morals to begin with, honestly. I mean, sports teams don't. Like, I'm sorry, they don't. But like, they currently give a weekly paycheck to Kareem Hunt. They currently give a weekly paycheck to Mike Nuke the Gays Prefer. Okay, so like their morals, they didn't have any already. So let's not pretend like they had some high moral character and that they were like completely abandoned
some moral high ground. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't exist. Okay. Yep. I don't care for Kareem Hunt. I don't care for Mike Prefer. Deshaun Watson sounds like a terrible human being, but we can't just go, oh, this is the moment that they've sacrificed morals. They didn't have any. Okay,
that's the problem here.
Mike McDowell was another character that fell into this. He had his own like set of legal troubles before he came to the team. Okay, no one was up in arms about them signing Malik McDowell. No one was up in arms about this. I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah,
they don't have morals. Let's stop pretending they do. No sports organization does, and they tell you they do, they're lying.
Right. Yeah. I think there is a bit of a double standard because, like you were just saying, like, and don't worry, we will get to the football aspect of this, but this conversation did need to happen. But like you said, like Malik McDowell, he had his own legal issues, and nobody was up in arms about it. But the moment we signed Kareem Hunt, to go back to that for just a sec, people are up in arms about it. Or the moment we made the trade for Deshaun Watson yesterday, people were up in arms about it because Deshaun Watson's a more notable player than Malik McDowell. Kareem Hunt is a more notable player than Malik McDowell.
I mean, there's that. I mean, a couple of years ago when they hired Mike Prefer, I was upset about it because of the comments he made. He advocated for genocide. Okay, let's be real here. And he's, if you're not aware of the comment, he said he wants to put all the gays on the island and nuke it till it glows. Okay, so yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that real quick. But I wrote something saying that this was a terrible decision, and I was quote tweeted by someone calling me the 6-letter F word. What 6-letter F word wrote this? And another person quote tweeted with just bundle of sticks. We all know what that means. Okay. Like, they don't give a shit.
And here's the other thing too, James, is we have proof, concrete proof that those things happened and that those things were said. And I'm not excusing anything Deshaun has done or is accused of doing, but we don't yet have the proof in front of us, so it's a little different, and it's like, why are you okay with somebody who's, like you said, collecting a check weekly, who we have evidence of doing something that's appalling, and you're not up in arms about that, but Deshaun, who has some allegations, you want to, this is where you draw the line. So I think that's kind of the point too, is like, if you thought that the Cleveland Browns were operating from some moral high ground, we're not, and we haven't been for a long time.
Look at the Haslams. They had some of their own legal trouble.
Right. I mean, and that goes league wide. I mean, even, a lot of people would argue that the Patriots became America's team. Bob Kraft has some very similar experiences to what Deshaun has experienced, or it's a similar situation in a weird way. Let's put it that way. But he was caught red-handed, and he's still the owner of that team. And you don't see people, turning in their Patriots jerseys. And it's just, the fact of the matter is that the NFL is a business. And they've shown time and time again that if a player is elite on the field, they're willing to sacrifice just about any morals to let that person play. And that's just the fact of the matter. And the problem here is that this is true about every organization, not just the Cleveland Browns. There are no perfect organizations with
there aren't. And I mean, even still, like the most legendary Cleveland Brown player of all time has his own history of serious things that did happen. Okay. Jim Brown has a statue outside the stadium, and he is not some angel. Okay. So let's just mention that real quick. I mean, even other sports, you look at, hate to say it, but Kobe Bryant, he had his whole incident in Colorado. Derrick Rose also had his own allegations against him as well. So
how about Donald Sterling with the Clippers and everything that happened there?
I mean, Donald Sterling
league wide and every
I was trying to keep things in the same realm as the Watson things, but Donald Sterling, complete scumbag, yes.
Yeah. I think Josh's point is that, like, NBA, MLB, NHL, like, you're gonna have instances of these people who are in positions of power or are captains on the team who have some very questionable moral history and like I said, things that we have on paper that are facts, and we're not holding these people to that same standard. So as a sports fan, it's you have to be willing to draw the line, and you have to ask yourself, like, what am I willing to accept and what am I not? And the fact of the matter is that there's so many problems from a moral standpoint throughout the sports world that, like, I couldn't root for pretty much any of my favorite teams, or if I lived by that. So it's an unfortunate part of sports, but we love the game, and we that's why we keep doing our jobs, and we can't put our pens down because the Browns signed Deshaun Watson. But what we can do is come here and have a real conversation about it, and at least hold ourselves accountable to a certain standard. And I think that a lot of journalists in the Cleveland area are kind of tiptoeing around it right now. They don't want to address it. So if I could say anything about the three of us, it is at least, we're here and we're talking about it. I think it needs to happen. And I think that before we look forward as an organization, people really need to come to terms with some of this stuff.
Right. So I think we should try and look at least some of the actual football aspect of it.
I agree.
I know it's hard to separate, the football aspect of it from all the legal part of it, but let's just try to do that for a few minutes anyway.
Okay. So what is the big difference you guys see with going from Baker Mayfield to Deshaun Watson? Because I see a much more accurate thrower of the football, a much more decisive decision maker, a much more just better fit for any type of offense, specifically one where the Browns tried to get more vertical. They tried to use more speed. They tried to pass the ball downfield more, and they simply weren't able to. So Watson adds a nice new, I guess, elite level, talent to the offense.
Yeah, he brings a very unique set of skills on the field that are exceptionally better than Baker Mayfield's skill set. Let's put it that way. So we got a lot better immediately with this trade. And he's a guy that, during his, his prime that he's had at up to this point, he was a top 5 player in the league. Like Baker's never been there, even at his best, he's never been a top 5 guy. So we went from a guy who's been on the bubble, is he a starter? Is he not? To a guy who's established himself as a tier 1 quarterback in this league when he's playing his best football. So the ceiling has immediately, it's much, much higher for this team now.
Right. And it doesn't just go back to his days in Houston. Like, you go back and look at his career in Clemson. Like, before he got there, Clemson, they were doing things, but they had never reached the levels that they got to until Deshaun Watson got there. I understand that they had other pieces there too, like Travis Etienne, Hunter Renfrow, and several others, but still, Deshaun Watson was the central figure of that. It's why we got that mini rivalry, I would say, between Alabama and Clemson for the few years that we did.
He's an elite player that can change the landscape for an organization. As I think that's kind of what your point is
exactly.
When he got to Clemson, they weren't yet this elite college football powerhouse.
Exactly.
But since he arrived and, he got them there. When he got to Houston, it's a expansion team not too long ago, and he took them places that they hadn't been before. He's a guy that immediately has shown that he can come in and take an organization up to the next level with his ability on the field.
Right. And what I think this does more than anything is and I think we all agree on this, and James, you kind of touched on this earlier, it opens up the playbook, because with Baker, we were so limited on what we could do offensively, because it felt like Baker was almost afraid to throw the ball down the field at times. Whereas Deshaun Watson's like, nope, I'm just going to let it rip.
I mean, Baker became very risk averse as his time in the NFL has, gone on. He was very willing to take chances his first 2 years. And the second year being such a disaster, he didn't take chances anymore. You looked at a lot of the throws he made as a rookie, and it's like, man, that thing could have been picked. I mean, think about the throw against the Panthers where he rolled out to his left and he found Jarvis just in between those 2 Panthers defenders. Like, that ball could have been easily intercepted or knocked down, but it just happened to escape the fingertips of those 2 defenders, and it was a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you saw a lot of, regression. You saw a lot of, not willing to take chances. I mean, you saw him not do anything spectacular this entire season.
Yeah, for a guy who certainly seems very full of himself, he played very tentatively. He definitely lost his swagger on the field. He wasn't confident in making the down the field throws, and I think to a certain extent he was just limiting the damage that he did on the field because he knew he wasn't capable of doing great things. So it was, well, I'm just going to not suck really bad, so hopefully I can, continue to compete at this level. But let's face it, like, we had a very bad season with Baker at the helm. And things did not look good towards the end of that season either. And he was injured and playing through some of that, but I mean, the problems were there before. And like you said, James, a lot of the great plays he made early on were marginally, terrible plays. Everything seemed to have gone his way that rookie season. And that doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
Right. So with this addition, do you think there's a possibility we could bring Jarvis Landry back?
It's possible. I saw a report about an hour ago from Jeremy Fowler that said Jarvis Landry, Leonard Fournette, and AJ Green all plan to go to Atlanta if Deshaun Watson went to the Falcons.
Ooh, that's interesting.
So I could see some more movement happening. I think it's possible. I wouldn't rule it out.
That's the other thing Deshaun does for this team immediately is he makes it a way more attractive destination for free agents.
Which kind of scares me a little bit because as soon as Deshaun Watson announced he was coming to Cleveland, guess who was on Twitter like, hey, I'm going to be coming to Cleveland.
Oh, Antonio Brown. Forget Antonio Brown. Okay. I mean, he's a non-factor. But you'll be looking at actual players that actually matter to come. Okay. The only reason Antonio Brown played last year is because he played for the Buccaneers. Okay. Yeah. He had Tom Brady in his camp, in his back, So you look at it like from that perspective. There's the only reason why he's played for two teams in the past couple of years, and they both had Tom Brady on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't see anybody on this team going to bat for him the way that Brady did, and nobody has the kind of pull that Brady had, so it doesn't matter anyway. But yeah,
it really scared me when I saw that personally.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, they're not going to bring in Antonio Brown. Don't worry about that. But yeah, I think that's one of the things too that immediately changes is like we weren't capable of landing a lot of the players that are probably going to be interested in playing with us in the future now. And that's huge, because one of the things we knew about Baker was that he had lost the locker room. And when they announced that they weren't going to honor his trade request and what have you, it was like, okay, you could tell the guys in this locker room will not accept him being the starter week one. Like that just was not going to happen. So yeah, you've got a guy that players want to play with, and that's already an immediate difference from the team last year because we had guys like OBJ who couldn't really wait to get out of town, and once they did, they thrived. So,
right. So like we said in the beginning, Deshaun's most likely going to be suspended for, I would say, minimum 5 games if I had to guess, but it could be longer, could be shorter. We'll see. We're not going to get into that whole discussion right now, but I think if we can keep Case Keenum, which I don't think he's a free agent, is he?
No, they have him under contract for 1 more year. And just real quick, I want to take a victory lap on the Case Keenum signing from a couple of years ago. I literally called this situation happening. Like if Baker's not their guy and they have to move on, him having the 3-year deal going into Baker's year 5 makes just so much sense. So victory lap real quick for myself. Because
it's a contingency plan to have.
I mean, they lined up those contracts on purpose. It wasn't an accident that they ran the same length if Baker was to play under the 5th-year option, which he will be, just not here.
Right.
I mean, I heard that with that whole thing, the Browns didn't even – I think, James, you might have actually said this. The Browns didn't even want to pick up Baker Mayfield's 5th-year option. But the playoff run that we had in 2020 screwed that whole thing up and pretty much cornered Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry to the point where they were like, okay, we have to pick up his 5th-year option.
Yeah, that's what I've seen is that they didn't want him. They came here and they were going to just ride out 2020 and part ways after that season. And the playoff run messed it all up. But I mean, the biggest misconception about Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry coming to Cleveland is that they came here because of Baker.
That was not why they came.
They came here because it was a job that was open that was offered to them. Okay, There's only 32 jobs. Why do you think people continue to go interview and get hired by the Jaguars?
Right.
How many coaches have we seen cycle through here? Okay, right. It's a job that's available. Okay, so that's why they take it. That's why they interview for it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real here. Andrew Berry being here when the team drafted Baker Mayfield means absolutely nothing because he did not make that decision.
Yeah.
Paul DePodesta, who's somehow still involved with the situation, him being involved had nothing to do with those guys coming to town. Kevin Stefanski interviewing with the Browns, the only team that interviewed him, by the way, had nothing to do with Baker Mayfield. Had to do with the job that was available that was offered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. But now with this team and this roster and, Deshaun being the starting quarterback, now it is becoming a more attractive job. It's not just one of 32. Now it's a team that's on the verge of competing. So
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how things shake out between now and with the draft coming up, and to see what the roster looks like at the start of training camp is going to be really interesting.
I agree with you. And, well, we don't have to worry about the first round of the draft because we no longer have that pick because it went to Houston in that trade.
Can we talk about how excellent of a trade that was? They still have 8 draft picks in this coming draft.
Right. It's incredible. They only had to give up 1 draft pick this year.
They still have 8 pretty damn good draft picks. The second round pick is, towards the, I guess, front of the middle part of the second round, but it's a good.
Not just that, we were kind of thinking that maybe a Chubb would be involved in the trade, or a Ward would be involved in the trade, and neither of those guys had to be put on the table for this. So yeah, what a great trade. I just don't. I don't see how this couldn't work out well for the Browns. The situation has gotten immediately much, much better for the Cleveland Browns football team, put it that way.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll talk about this more on our Wednesday show because we're not going to go the full 2 hours like we usually do. We're probably going to go hour at maximum, but
you're ready to wrap up, but sure.
Whatever. Anyway, I forget what I was saying now. Damn it.
No, you're just trying to drag the show on much, much longer than it needs to. No, we needed to have a special show because it was very big news. And also we needed to have this discussion. So here we are. We had the discussion. Now, at least on Wednesday, we can kind of move forward and talk about some of the hypotheticals, some of the, AFC North outlook and quarterbacks in the division and stuff like that. But, we have to save some of that stuff for Wednesday so that we have a 2-hour show to bring you. So really, I don't know. I think this is probably a good time to put a bow on things and wrap it up for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a pretty good spot. We got everything that we needed to mention here and discuss.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely let us know in the comments. Feel free to chime in on what you think about the situation. And we look forward to meeting with you guys on Wednesday.
Yep. And before we go, if you haven't done so already, go over to YouTube, search for So What's the Catch, and subscribe to the page. Also subscribe to Unger to the Max, Brian Fraley, and what's your YouTube again, James?
I don't remember. Doesn't matter. Go to thisisbelievin.com, read my shit.
Okay, we'll go with that. And with that, we will see you on Wednesday.